Hey everybody. Today I thought I'd try something a little bit different and do an unboxing of the new Zoom P4next. Matthew and I talked about this device about a month ago when it was announced, and we'd commented on the name Zoom, or on the way Zoom added Next to the P4. It just seemed kind of clunky instead of compared to something like, I don't know, Zoom P4 Mark II, but somebody left a comment that I guess Next has always been part of Zoom's normal naming convention for second-gen devices, such as the H4n. That N stands for Next. This is just the first time it's actually been spelled out. So that kind of explains the naming convention. It still seems weird to me, but that's what they've chosen. But before we unbox, let's take a look at the original P4 and what's new in the P4next. And if you have any comments, questions, go ahead and drop them in. We'll get to those as we come to them. But let's get started. So first, and as usual, the Stream Deck is slow as usual. Let me pull up my window. Okay, so this is the original P4. Kind of a clunky looking thing, but they call it the ultimate recorder for podcasting. Compact, affordable, and loaded with features, the PodTrack P4 makes it easy to capture professional quality audio wherever you're recording your podcasts. Let me put this in the center of my screen so it's easier to read. Has high quality mic inputs with up to 70 dB of gain. It has 4 mic preamps, 4 headphone ports. You can connect call-in guests with a TRRS cable or via USB. It has mix minus. You can connect wirelessly. It has sound pads, battery operated, audio interface. The P4 can serve as a 2 input, 2 output audio interface. So that's a bit of a limitation. You might have 4 inputs coming into the P4, but when using it as an audio interface, your computer will only see 2 inputs. That's not ideal. That's about all there is there. Let's look at the features and specs. You've got 4 mic inputs with XLR, 4 headphone ports with individual volume control, gain control knobs and mute buttons for each mic, phantom power, mix minus. You can connect your phone with the TRRS, sound pads. Each input can be recorded on separate tracks. 16-bit 44K audio wave. That was the one spec that prevented me from ever recommending this, because 16-bit 44.1 is such an old standard. It's fine for playback devices. Stuff like CD, playing anything back, that's fine. But when it comes to recording audio, it's, especially the 16-bit, it's really limiting because it can capture less dynamic range. You have less margin for error, and you need to get the signal loud enough that you're not competing with the noise floor. The problem with that is if you set it too loud and somebody laughs or starts talking a little louder, you run the risk of clipping. The 44.1 sample rate, the problem with that was if you're doing video work, 48K works across all frame rates, whereas 44.1 doesn't match up with every frame rate. So that's going to be a problem with audio. It's just easiest to stick to 48K if you're doing any kind of audio or video work. So now let's take a look at the P4next. The podcasting revolution continues. Let's just look at the specs. I'm not going to read all this. Since it's Zoom, we had to throw AI in. They've added AI noise reduction. They've got tone, compression. Okay, so tone is EQ, de-essing, reducing harshness and adding warmth for clear professional podcast sound. So this is all just marketing copy that doesn't really tell you anything. Can anybody tell me what sounding crisp actually means? Because I have no idea what that means. So we still have 70 dB of gain. We've got 48 kilohertz 24-bit recording. Matthew and I talked about that on our stream. That's probably the biggest thing here. I'm guessing they probably heard enough comments that they needed 24, 48K, but because people are people, when they announced the P4next, you got a lot of people complaining, well, why doesn't it have 32-bit recording like your other devices? If you know what you're doing, if you're setting your gain well, 24-bit is more than enough. 32-bit is just overkill. 32-bit is best used for out in the field, one-man band, run and gun type setups, or if you're recording sounds that are very dynamic. So like if you're out recording jet engines or something, 32-bit is going to help so you don't clip. But for podcasting, 24, 48 is more than enough. And I can't remember if they added anything new. Okay, so you can connect it to your phone to bring audio in when you record. If you record with your phone, you can live stream with it. US interface or USB interface. Let me see if there's a specs somewhere. I do not see a specs sheet. I know I saw that on one of these pages. Well, the other thing that I do know from looking this stuff up is that Zoom has now made it so it functions as a, I believe, 12 input, 2 output audio interface. That means that I'm not sure what the other 8 input channels are, but you get obviously your 4 mics as input channels. And your DAW will see all 4, along with whatever the other 8 tracks are. I'm assuming 4 of the tracks are your sound pads, probably like Bluetooth, phone connection, stuff like that. But now that we've kind of gone over what the original P4 was and what the new P4next is, let's get into the unboxing. Okay, so we've got the box here. From the looks of it, it looks like it's smaller than the original was. Welcome back to the show. There's a QR code. We've got the P4next. We get a little sticker, Zoom creator. And then we've got your usual assortment of inserted stuff in multiple languages. Nothing very useful in there. So let's go ahead and open up the interface or recorder. So it's smaller. Actually, I meant to go grab like an audio interface. I'll be right back. And I realize maybe I was muted, maybe I wasn't. With the Stream Deck, I never know. But what we can see is that the P4 is going to be a really good choice if you need portability. It's light. It's battery operated or battery powered. Let's see. The headphone ports are all 1/8" jacks. On the side, we've got our slider for phantom power. I'm not sure if that's global or if there's a way to turn that on channel by channel. You have two USB ports, one for USB and the other to provide power. You've got your micro SD port here. On the back, you've got your, if I can hold it without dropping it, you've got your 4 XLR ports. On the right side, you've got input 4, which you can toggle between XLR and phone. And then you've got 2 1/8" jacks. It's not really clear what those are for. One looks like a phone. They're called BTA2. And then I'm not sure if I showed the front headphone ports. And then I'm not sure why I'm frozen up. Probably using my cell phone as a camera. But at the top, we've got sound pads here. We've got our menu, tone, compression, and AI noise reduction buttons. And then we've got the mute along here. We've got our gain knobs, our volume knobs. And then up top, we've got power, record, play, and pause. For some reason, everything keeps freaking out on my end. We've got a comment. Let me pull this up. In the UK, we call potato chips crisps, but I'm guessing that's not related. Yeah, I'm probably not, but yeah, if anybody knows what crispy in audio means, to me, it's one of those words that it just doesn't mean anything. To me, crispy with audio is kind of a bad thing. To me, I think distorted, something like that. Clear makes sense. Crispy, not so much. But let's go back to the P4. Let's see if I can get anything. In true Zoom fashion, they do not include anything with this. No USB cables, no batteries. All you get is the the P4next. But that is what Zoom does. They build things to a price point. And to keep it at $179, they can't include anything. Okay, let's see if this provides enough power to work the interface. Okay, so it does. So you turn it on. We've got a tiny, tiny little screen. And again, I apologize if I'm freezing up. I don't know if that's only on my end or if it's coming through on the stream. If I am freezing up, let me know, and I do apologize. But let's go through the menus a little bit to see how easy this is to make sense of. Okay, we can have guide sound, we can have voice and beep, beep only and off. Okay, so the tone and comp buttons act as your up and down buttons. So these will toggle things, move your selection up and down. And the AI noise reduction button is your enter. Okay, so today is November 25th. So let's set that up. Okay, so it's, I guess, not really good to see, but Zoom has not changed in that trying to set up any device of theirs is just tedious. So many small buttons, so many combo buttons. Nothing can be really easy. That's always been my biggest complaint with Zoom. And it's 8:05 my time. Okay, so we can choose the battery type. I'm not sure how much this shows. We'll just move back to me for a minute. Okay, so we can choose the battery type between alkaline, NiMH, lithium. I'd probably be using alkaline for now, but I don't tend to use battery. We'll just skip that for now. Okay, message done. If we go into the menu, we have a file list, sound pad, mic settings, SD card, USB file transfer, USB audio interface, system, help. One of the things with most of the Zoom, at least H series recorders, is you have to go in and change between recorder mode and USB mode. I wonder if that is the case here. It might not. It might just work as a USB. Let me see if it pops up on my system as an interface. Give me just a minute. Okay, where's sound? And I've got 18,000 different audio devices, so it takes me a second to scan through everything. Okay, so it does not seem to be showing up as an audio interface. I'm not sure if that's because the cable I'm using isn't supplying enough power, or if I need to go into a certain mode. And for USB audio interface in the menu, we have options for USB level. So we can turn that up or down. Mode toggles between stereo and multi-track. So if you're using this as an audio interface, you'll want to have it set up as multi-track. And then you can turn on mix minus, which I'm assuming you would want to do if you are using this as an audio interface, but also using it for recording content. Like if you're doing a podcast, you'll probably want mix minus turned on. And it shouldn't hurt if you have it turned on when you don't need it. But I can't promise that's the case. This is Zoom, so who knows? That's what the manual is for, if you can make it through. But yeah, I'm not seeing a way to toggle on audio interface mode. So I'll have to dig into the menu and see, do I have anything else that's USB that I can test with? Okay, that's USB. Let's see what this does. Or actually, I had it plugged into the power button. Or the power port. That would explain why it wasn't showing up as an audio interface. You have to connect it to the computer to actually show up. Okay, so it is showing up as an audio interface. You don't have to go in and toggle between interface and recorder mode, so that's a good thing. The menu system really isn't that terrible on this, just because you don't have a ton of settings. The file list lets you see the files on your SD card. Soundpad lets you adjust soundpad level and access the 4 different soundpads. Mic settings, let's see what's in there. Okay, so we can turn on a low cut filter and a limiter. Usually at 24-bit, you shouldn't need a limiter, but you can turn it on just in case as kind of a safety net. But the low cut is always good to have on, and you can turn that on per mic. There's a little checkbox for each one. Okay, so I was getting some jitter with the product shot camera, and that's probably because I'm using my cell phone connected wirelessly. I don't know why I have it connected wirelessly. Probably because my cable doesn't reach all the way over there. Yeah, that's not going to reach. It was a temporary setup. At some point, I'll get some other camera I can actually set up that can be connected through USB, which is a lot easier for me to get over there and hopefully have a longer cable. But apologies for things glitching there. But back to the mic settings. Let's check the limiter. The limiter can also be toggled on and off per channel. SD card. Again, it gives me an error that there's no SD card. USB file transfer. Again, no SD card. Audio interface, and then system. We have accessibility, and that's where you can have it speak things to you. Play key in recorder mode. We want that to be multi-track. I'd have to look at the manual to figure out what play key and record means. The options are pause only, pause and mark, mark only. We can set date and time. We have display settings for brightness and power saving. So for brightness, we have bright, medium, and dark. For power saving, we have 1 minute, 3 minutes, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and off. Again, we've got battery type, auto power off. Our options are 10 hours and never, and the default's to 10 hours. So always good to have that on, especially if you're running off battery. Firmware, reset all settings. And that's what we got. I guess I didn't go into the accessibility menu. You have guide sound and volume. So it's nice that they have accessibility to help people who might not have good vision, someone who might not have vision at all. And to me, I can read everything. Everything seems to be well laid out. But I can see how, for some people, having that accessibility could be a huge thing. So in the overall scheme of things, as far as the P4next, let me go ahead and turn this off so I can hold it up again. But basically, it's much smaller than the Vocaster. They're about the same height. But the P4 is going to be much better for portable setups. Anything where you need to be on the go, or anything that you need to take up a small amount of desk space. As far as the build quality, it's all plastic. It's a decent plastic, but I wouldn't test it out to see how far you can drop it or how many times you can drop it. It just doesn't feel quite as sturdy as even what the Vocaster 2 is made out of, which is also plastic, but it doesn't feel quite as cheap, I guess. But compared to stuff like the Rodecaster and Mackie DLZ, the P4, it just feels like it's in a different league. Like it feels like it's, how's the best way to put it? It just feels cheap compared to the Mackie and the Rodecaster. There's no way around it. It feels cheap. But feel and the build quality doesn't really matter when we're trying to find something affordable that we can toss in a backpack and go record wherever we need to. That's going to be a bit tougher with the Rodecaster or the Mackie DLZ just because they are bigger and have different needs. you need some kind of power, whether it's a battery pack. I don't even know if the Rodecaster is powered over USB-C, but it has to be plugged in. I'm not sure if you could use a power bank to power it over USB. I would assume so. But with the Mackie, that uses a barrel connector, so that makes it a lot less portable. I'm trying to think what else. I can't really test out the preamps right now to see if they're cleaner than, say, the H series Zoom preamps, which from the times I've used them, I've found them to be pretty noisy. We'd gotten like an H5 or an H6 for recording some stuff, and one of the preamps was just completely unusable because of the noise. But the others just had way too much noise at the higher end of the gain range. So I think when it comes to making a decision about what kind of podcast mixer is going to be best for you, there's a few things we need to kind of look at. What's your budget? How much can you afford? That's the big one. If you've got the budget for a Mackie or Rodecaster, just go with one of those. If you need portability, you can't beat this. It's, probably 4 inches by 4 inches, I'm guessing. Maybe, yeah, that can't be more than 4 or 5 inches square. So that fits really nicely in anything. It's going to be your best option for recording 4 people in person for under $200. There's just nothing else out there at that price point. And that's why you don't get stuff like USB-C cables. That's why you don't get more sturdy feeling housing. Zoom builds things to that price point, and they cut things down to hit that. Their Zoom products are always going to be compromises. With the first generation, they compromised by giving you 16-bit 44.1. This time they made it smaller, gave you 24/48. This is a much better device all around. There's nothing about this that would give me hesitation to recommending it to people looking for something at that price point. Because what's the next closest competitor? The Mixcast 4? I think those are like $350, somewhere around there. I can never remember who makes it. It's not Tascam. I think it's the Tascam Mixcast 4. It's Tascam or that other company. I get those two mixed up. But I think that's the next competitor before you get up to the Rodecasters. And to get 4 channels with the Rodecaster, the Mackie, I think you're looking at $700. So I think this P4next is going to be a good option for a lot of people starting out who need to record in person. But if you're not recording 3 or more people in person, I would just go with an audio interface, something like the Vocaster Two, which is right now selling for $69. It's going to be a much better option for you for in-person stuff because you don't have menus. Everything is right here on the interface. Yeah. I know I talked about it, but menu diving in Zoom stuff is just tedious. That's where an audio interface really shines. It's a much simpler thing where you have a lot more hands-on controls, no menu diving. You set, if there's any kind of settings, you do that all in software, and once you've got it configured, that's pretty much it. All you need is the ability to adjust the gain and headphone volume. But where things like the Rodecaster and the Mackie really shine is that user interface when you need. They really shine for live streaming, where you really need that hands-on control, the ability to have stuff like EQ and compression, limiting, de-essing, all of that stuff baked in. Like live streaming right now, I'm going through software with my audio interface, but that's one of the strengths of the Rodecasters and Mackies. You've got real-time control. You can apply different types of processing. You have full control over everything. Actually, I never did look at the tone and compressor on this to see what we have there. Since they're calling it tone and the way they described it on the website, I don't think we have. Yeah, it's just an all or nothing type thing. You turn on tone for all their global settings. So when you press tone, it just turns that on for everybody. When you press comp, it turns it on for everybody. Okay, so the AI noise reduction, for anyone who's familiar with Isotope RX, what was the function? Spectral denoise, where you train it on the background noise. That's how this operates, because you press AI noise reduction. It says, now learning, please be quiet. So it's listening for the noise floor. What that tells me is the AI noise reduction is probably only doing noise reduction of the noise floor. So if you've got a fan, stuff like that, computer fans, ceiling fans, whatever, it's going to use that profile to reduce those sounds. I don't think it's going to do anything for like dogs barking. It's not going to do anything about reverb. That stuff's always much harder to do in real time. But yeah, that's, for me, if you're doing one or two people in person, go with an audio interface. If you're doing 3 or 4 people in person, look at something like the Rodecaster Pro, Mackie DLZ. If you've got the budget and you want just a fancy looking toy, or if you do live streaming or remote interviews, 1 or 2 people. Sorry, Ziggy's over here coughing. But the Mackie and the Rodecaster, or the Mackie DLZ XS and the Rodecaster Duo, those really excel for live streaming or remote shows, remote interviews where you just want to bake in that processing or have the ability to play sound effects. I guess that's the biggest difference between an audio interface and the Duo and XS, is you get real-time faders. Well, I guess with the Vocaster, you've got essentially the same thing, but you don't have control over like the volume of audio coming in from the computer, which is, again, something that really stands out as a feature for live streamers who might be mixing stuff from YouTube videos or games or whatever audio sources they need from their computer. Having that on a fader becomes really nice. But I don't think let me start that over. I think too many podcasters look at what other people are using and just try to mimic that. They hear people who sound good and find out that they're using a Rodecaster and a Shure SM7B. So they think, if I go out and get this equipment, I'll sound just as good as them. Chances are you're not going to sound quite as good as they do. There's a lot of things that go into sounding good, and the equipment really does only play a small part in that. The room you're in, the type of mic that you're using, condenser versus dynamic, how you have it positioned. Do you have it positioned really close to you? I'm sorry if there's any handling noise here. Or do you have it set a foot away from you and you sound like this? I can probably get away with having it further away, turning up the gain some, because I've treated the acoustics in my space. A Rodecaster, it's not going to make your space sound any better than it already does. It's not going to help you if you don't know how to position your mic. So those are the most important things. It's good that Rode and Mackie came out with their 2-channel versions, because I got frustrated seeing solo people using Rodecaster Pros, the full version, with 4 channels and all of that stuff, when they're just doing live streams with themselves or doing remote interviews. It was really overkill. You were spending $700 and only using, at best, a quarter of the features. But with something like the Zoom P4, it doesn't matter if you're only using 1 or 2 of the mics out of it, because you're getting it for $179. You're not wasting a whole lot of money on features that you're not using. So that's kind of my little spiel on how I look at these different things. To me, I come from an audio background. Audio interfaces, they're simple. You basically set them up and just adjust the gain and the volume. That's it. When it comes to audio interfaces, though, if you need more than 2 channels, you're going to start seeing that price increase quite a bit, because audio interfaces generally come in 2-channel, 4-channel, 8-channel, and 16-channel versions. Each one is going to jump up quite a bit in price. So you can get like a 2i2 for, what, $200? And then I think you're looking at $350, $400, maybe $450 for, what is it, their 18i8, whatever their next one is that has 4 inputs. So for a podcaster, once you move past 2, you really are looking at the podcast mixer space. And we should probably talk about that for a minute. I see a lot of podcasters who get cheap mixers that are built for music and then wonder why it's not working well for their podcast. Music mixers, they're built to do a different thing than podcast mixers are. Podcast mixers are built to give you what you need as a podcaster. Individual tracks, so you can process and mix each track individually. Mixers built for music, they take all of the inputs and submix them down into a stereo output. So for the really cheap mixers, even if they can connect to your computer over USB, they tend to be, your computer tends to only see 2 channels of input. So all of those channels, all of those mics you have connected in, whether you have 2, 5, 18, they're all going to be seen as 2 inputs on your computer. Basically the left and the right. They're all mixed together. That's not good for podcasting. I mean, at that point, there's not a huge difference between that and using a Yeti set in the middle of the room. Everything's being recorded to one track. Not good. Generally, you have to get into some of the more expensive mixers before you start seeing them function as a true audio interface where each mic shows up as an input. So when you're shopping, you definitely need to understand that difference between a typical PA style mixer versus a podcast mixer. But to get back to what we were talking about, once you hit 3 people in person, that's when you really need to start looking at the podcast mixer space. The Rodecaster and the P4, they can both double as portable recorders. The P4 obviously does excel as a portable recorder just because of its form factor. And at the price, if it gets damaged, it's a lot easier to replace than damaging a Rodecaster and having to replace that. So does anybody have any questions about these? I'm here to answer anything you've got. Another thing to think about since we are in Black Friday is Rode doesn't tend to do big sales on their stuff, but I know B&H sometimes has used products. That's how I got my P4. I just have P4 on the head, on the brain. But that's where I got my Rodecaster Duos from B&H. It was used. They usually grade each used item as like new, good, excellent, stuff like that. So I basically got a like new Rodecaster, and it was, I think, $400, maybe a little bit less. So there are some good deals if you're willing to go used, especially if you go from a reputable dealer. Another place or another route is looking for refurbished models. There are places like Pro Audio Star. They sell a lot of B stock and refurbished and B stock a lot of times. Sometimes it's B stock, but a lot of times it's just overstock that they're selling. And they sell it for discounted prices. I've gotten, I think, my last 2 Apollos from them. I think I've gotten pretty much all of my Universal Audio hardware, the 2 Apollos and the UAD expander card from Pro Audio Star as refurbished. They were all, or actually B stock, one or the other, but there was no indication that they were used, opened up, everything was sealed like brand new, never had a problem with any of them. So that's also another route. With the Vocasters, I know Focusrite has a refurb shop, and I think they're about $5 to $10 cheaper. So you can get the Focusrite 1 for, I think, $35, and the Vocaster 2 for like $65. I mean, you're not going to find a better audio interface for podcasters than this. For $69, out of focus, even if it's out of focus at $69, is well worth it. It's what, a $200. I mean, I think before they started blowing them out, they were selling for $249, and now they're $70. That's just a crazy deal. I don't think there's much else I can talk about with the podcast mixers other than personally, from my use cases, from my experience, I prefer the Mackie DLZ. I felt I was able to get up and running a lot faster with it. I didn't feel as frustrated with trying to get everything set up because everything is named what I expect it to be. They put a lot of time into their UI, UX, the menus, all of that stuff. So it was really easy to get where I wanted. Everything was clearly named. With the Rodecaster, I feel like if I have to dive into the menus for anything, I spend far too much time trying to find what I need in order to adjust what I'm trying to do. From that regards, I would take the Mackie DLZ every day over the Rodecaster. The biggest con with the Mackie DLZ XS is, and it's not really a con, just a difference, you get knobs instead of faders. That doesn't bother me. Some people might not like that. Some people like having the faders where you can adjust them, and for me, there's no difference. I've been using knobs to adjust the volume on my audio interface forever, so that's no big deal. I see people talk about how the Rodecaster keeps getting firmware updates and the Mackie doesn't. Most of the features that Rode has introduced really, they're not really new features. They're just expanding usability a little bit. The two biggest ones I can think of was virtual channels and what was the new one? You can connect two Rodes. Let me start that over. I can connect my Rodecaster to someone else remotely and bring those together, kind of like we would with Zoom. But the audio quality, I think it's using a 24 kilohertz sample rate or 30. If I remember right, it's kind of Zoom level audio quality. Okay, purchased Rodecaster Pro 2 because of the sync delay feature overkill. Since then, I've also purchased two Roland Bridgecasts. One is they have also got the same feature, and it's hardware processed too. I've seen a few people talk about the Rolands. I haven't looked into those myself, just because this equipment gets expensive, and after using the Rodecaster for a while, after using the Mackie for a while, going back to the Apollo, it's nice having a desk that's free of something that size. Down the line, I might, if I have spare money to spend, look at the Roland, or if anybody from Roland is watching and would like to send one out for me to review, I'd be happy to do that as well. I'll review anything people send me. But yeah, it's good to be reminded that there's another option out there. But for some reason, Roland has never kind of broken through into the podcasting space. And I don't know if that's just because they haven't marketed there. But for some reason, I mean, even Mackie hasn't really made much noise in the podcasting space, even though they have what I feel is the better product. And back to the firmware updates. I don't think there's anything Mackie needs to do as far as firmware updates, because they built something that is solid and works as it is. It doesn't need to add new features. I think the Mackie already had virtual channels, or at least the ability to route audio into everything, basically eliminating the need for introducing the virtual channels that Rode did. Personally, I don't have a need for whatever their newest feature is that allows you to connect Rodecasters remotely to each other to talk to each other. That just doesn't feel like something I needed or I'd ever use. Number one, because that's not my workflow. I do video when I record interviews. And the other is the audio quality. It's not wave quality. It's not 48, 24-bit recording. So that's a deal breaker for me. But that's me. For other people, it might be a great thing. I think it was something they added in because they could, and to say, hey, look, we added this new feature. It will be interesting to see if Mackie continues to develop the DLZ line since Rode purchased Mackie, or if we start seeing some of Mackie's stuff get mixed in with the Rodecaster. And I know as I say that, it sounds like Mackie has features that the Rodecaster doesn't, but more from the design side, the develop, or I'm not sure how to say that, but basically there's a couple of things Rode has done that make it a very prosumer level equipment. The headphones are not zero latency. What you hear through the headphones is processed. It comes after the AD conversion and after processing. So there is a small amount of latency there. Matthew and I tried talking about that last week in our stream. He's experiencing latency that is just enough to be a problem. I don't know if problem's the right word, but it's a challenge when what you hear in your head isn't matching with what you're saying. It's a feeling thing, and it can really mess with you. The other thing that I noticed, and this is a small nitpicky thing, because most people using a Rodecaster won't need this, but you can't, when you use the connect something that's line level into the Rodecaster, it doesn't bypass the preamp. Whereas with the Mackie, it does. And with the Mackie, you also get, what was it? I think you have sends out of it. So you could send to hardware. Like if you had a compressor or a channel strip, you could use the sends for that. But it's those little things that makes the Mackie seem a little more professionally designed than the Rodecaster. But that's all I have to say. My stomach is yelling at me, telling me it's time I need to eat. So, thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.